Next on our agenda, we are going in to take care of business with our Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind. First item is an informational item, and it's our fiscal year 21 budget update. I'd like to invite Finance Director Carl Empey. Are you ready to present?
I am. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chairs, and board members. The report today is for the 7 months that ended January 31st. We are financially solvent. The first report that we have is the financial report that does a 30,000-foot overview of our transfers from the state and also our expenditures. I'm just going to round up numbers. The transfers in from the state and the state office have totaled $26.1 million. Our expenditures were $22.4 million, giving us $3.7 million more in transfers in than we did expenditures. The number of students that we served is 2,225. And if you can scroll down on the report just a little bit, it'll show our enrichment fund balance. If you go down a little bit further, our enrichment fund balance is $1.4 million. Our donated fund balance is $266,000, and our educational foundation balance is $1.2 million. The report behind that is the budget status report that just gives the granular detail that is summarized on the financial report of the numbers that we just went over. Next report should be our enrichment fund report, which shows of the projects that were approved, and we'll be talking about the last project that we'll be seeking your approval for. Totals $1,624,500. We have spent $378,000 so far, giving us a balance remaining of $1.25 million. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair, you or the board may have on our financial reports.
We do have a hand raised at Vice Chair Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Carl. How are you?
Good. Good morning.
I wanted to ask you a question about the funding that we did not receive from the legislature. How are you going to work around some of those items that you had planned on and they didn't happen?
That's a really good question. We had requested at the beginning of the session, or prior to the beginning of the session, $1.4 million for FTEs to accommodate the needs in our school. The Public Education Appropriation Committee pared that down to $700,000. And then the Executive Appropriations Committee eliminated all that down to zero. We had conversations with legislative leadership, told them of example, we had one teacher teaching down in Springville, grades K through 3, all in one classroom. And so we needed additional staff. So kudos to the legislature. They restored us to $700,000 in funding for new FTEs. So we have a meeting next Tuesday with the superintendent and with the associate superintendents, and we're going to be discussing what the critical positions are going to be that we can fund with that $700,000. And then the superintendent has a plan for next legislative session to present legislation that will have wording in it that will be facilitate growth for us. Since we don't get and receive WPU money, we just get funded directly from the state, that will tie in a percent of related to that WPU that USDB will receive. So I think we'll be fine. We just won't have the positions filled that the associate superintendents have requested.
Do you have a follow-up?
I do, but I will wait until we're talking about the 3% rule. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Director Empey, I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
Great. That concludes my financial report then, and have a good day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll invite Superintendent Joe Coleman, and this is discussion item on R277-801, the 3% rule. He was asked to brief us and brief the board on this rule. So, time's yours, Superintendent.
Thank you. Good morning. And let's see. I've included a couple of simple spreadsheet documents in your packet for this, and I could either share those, or Jeff or whoever's driving can just pull those up on the screen. Last month, if you recall, there were some questions that arose about the 3% rule. And this morning, again, in public comment, I heard some comments from a coalition calling themselves the UEA Coalition for Teachers of the Visually Impaired, or something along those lines. And they have not spoken to us about this. And so I don't know really where some of this is coming from, except it was good because it gave us an opening this month to talk about the 3% rule. Especially with so many relatively new board members, we can talk about exactly what that is. USDB is not proposing any changes to the 3% rule. And so just to clarify that, and we don't have any intention of doing that. However, it's a good discussion to have. And since it's your rule, then you can weigh in on any input that you have. So what the 3% rule does in a nutshell is it segregates the school districts that USDB serves into two different groups. Those with more than 3% of the kids in the state, the largest districts, and there are about 8 or 9 of them, are required to provide their own services for children who are deaf, hard of hearing, blind, visually impaired. Not deaf blind. We actually serve everyone in the state if there's a child who's deaf blind. But those with less than 3% of the kids in the state receive, or the charter schools, for example, or medium or small size districts, they receive services gratis. We provide anything that they need for their kids who are deaf or visually impaired for those services. What interesting things have happened lately is we've looked at the numbers. If we could pull up the spreadsheet there. The number this year is about 20,000. It's like 19,990 kids or something. So 20,000 is the 3% number right now. And of course that adjusts as the population throughout the state adjusts of school children. On these spreadsheets, you can see in light blue these are the large districts above 3%, actually in blue or yellow. You'll see a natural, there's a kind of a group of medium-sized districts that we've highlighted in yellow. They are technically 3% districts, but a few of those, like Salt Lake District, you can see right there, and Tooele District, they're very, very close. And sometimes they go back and forth. They will be a 3% district, and then they'll not be a 3% district. And so, for example, last year, Provo, which is smaller, but they were not using our services. They rolled up on us and said, hey, we're eligible for those. So we had to come up with 3 FTEs immediately to serve them because by rule, we're obligated to do that. Salt Lake District, if you look at that right there, 20,536 this year. They are not increasing in enrollment like some of the other districts. So we anticipate that they might even lose 500 kids, and all of a sudden we would have to come up with all the FTEs that they're currently using for deaf educators or blind educators. I should say educators of the deaf or educators of the blind. Anyway, Tooele has gone the other way. They have grown, and so while we were serving them, this next year, they will be responsible to provide their own educators. And these districts in the 20,000 to 35,000 range of students those are the districts that consistently ask us, can you do more to help us? And it's really their challenge is finding people that can do it, and also of course budgetary challenges, but budget isn't always the issue for them. They really seem to want to serve the kids well. We've got a couple districts that I won't name, but in the low 30,000, one of them does a fantastic job. They have great people. They're serving very, very well. Another one is saying, we know that we're understaffed. We're underserving kids. Can you help us out a little bit? And the answer is we can. They can contract with us for services. And so we do that. But these are the districts that have said in the past, well, we would love to opt out of the 3% rule if there was a way, and just let you guys do it. You're really the experts in this, and we aren't. So we would like your resources. And so what we do as USDB is we try to support districts. And as you know, since my administration started about 8 years ago, we've tried to eliminate all of the there were some traditional turf battles in the past, and we've tried to say, we don't see this as a battle between our jurisdiction and yours. We really want to do whatever's in the best interest of the kids. And as districts, you get to actually choose that. You're in the driver's seat. And so we've got campus programs all the way to just some itinerant services and consultation services. Let us know what you want. So the 3% rule has been good because it's given us a line, but now that a lot of these districts are getting closer to that line and going back and forth, it's actually a good time for us to talk with you about it. I would say this, between 3% and 6% of the kids in the state, the districts in that range, which would be the ones in yellow on this, those are really the ones where there's more of a gray area. There's not a gray area in the rule, but these are the districts reaching out to us and saying, please do more to help us if you can, whatever you can. We would really appreciate that. Some of these districts, others are saying, no, we're fine, we're good. But that's where we try to, if we have part of an FTE that we can, like for example, O&M, orientation and mobility, is where teacher of the visually impaired helps students learn how to use cane travel and get around, right? That's a highly specialized position. It's not easy to find that. And if one of these districts might just need someone for a few hours a week, they don't need a full FTE with that. And so if we can help by providing that with them, we try to do that within our own footprint that we currently have, if we have that capacity that's going unused. So that's kind of just a primer on the 3% rule. And I'd be happy to answer questions if you had any about that.
Okay. Vice Chair Belknap.
Thank you. So Chair Huntsman, my question is about the 3% and the line being drawn in the sand. If people are seeking waivers, then, or needing waivers, why do we have a 3% rule? What is that protecting someone? Plus, I also see it as being an imbalance for our educators. They're sometimes hired by this group and they might be hired by that group, and I think there's some flip-flop.
Superintendent Coleman, you want to respond?
Yeah, I think the 3% rule came about just before I was elected to the State Board of Education, so I wasn't part of those discussions. But what I've heard is that there were some of the larger districts that were saying, look, USDB is kind of pushing us around here and insisting on certain things. We want to have control over our own complete special education programs. And so that's why that was put in place. And we actually agree with that position. We think the district should be driving when it comes to their students. I don't know if that answered everything that you asked, Board Member Belknap.
The question was about the concern about the teachers. They're either contracted by the district or by,
yeah,
in knowing who your employer is or who your employer will be tomorrow or the next
Right.
Yours?
Yeah, so we don't really have any intention of assuming employment. There was a couple of years ago when we proposed the opt-out in the rule, which actually you added to the rule, and it was subject to available funding. And there were a couple of districts that said, yeah, we'd love to no longer have to provide this ourselves, and we trust USDB, they've been good partners. So we went to the legislature with that, and they said, yeah, no, we don't want to fund you anymore for these districts that are doing them themselves. And so that idea kind of went away. And I think that had some educators who were happy with their employment in their current districts worried that all of a sudden they would have to become USDB employees. And I can certainly understand that. We don't have any intention of messing with someone's employment. As it is now, I'll be honest with you, these districts that are between 3% and 6% that seem to be the ones mostly asking us for help, if they came to us and asked us for additional help, if we have the capacity, we would share our people with them. That's why we're here, is to teach. We would not seek to displace anyone else. And so if they have a current footprint of 4 teachers for the deaf and 2 TVIs, teachers of the visually impaired, and they said, we really need an additional half FTE because we have one district right now that tells us they're getting an influx of students from California who have special needs. We'll try to help out if we, subject to the availability of funding, right? But we're not going to go in and say, okay, let us take over your whole program and we'll hire your people or anything like that. That's not our intention.
Did you have a follow-up, Laura?
I do. I'm still looking for a little clarity on that, because if a district is calling up and saying, we want you to take over our program now, we don't want to do it, then they aren't having to fund that. So why wouldn't every school call and say, we want you to take this over, so now we don't have to pay for this, but you do. And so we're clear of this, which leaves teachers in the middle with no jobs that were like TVIs or whatever it before.
Yeah.
Hired by that district. Thanks, Chair.
No, I think we're talking mostly about increased capacity here. If they have certain teachers employed already where they are, we're not going to mess with that at all. But if they come to us and say, like, for example, an audiologist, we don't have an audiologist. Do you have any additional caseload that you could share with us? Or they will pay for it. If it's 3% or greater districts, they'll pay for it and they can contract with us. They do that anyway. In fact, Canyons district is an example. Canyons is one in between 3 and 6%. And they've always just said, you know what, we'll just contract with you for everything that we need. So they're actually USDB employees, but they're paying for them. That doesn't hurt our FTE count at all because it holds us harmless.
And Vice Chair Davis?
I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around who is generating the funding. If a student is being served through an LEA, the student is generating the funding through the WPU add-on, I guess. And if USDB is coming in to provide services for the student, then a state line item is generating the funding. Is my understanding correct, or am I missing?
Yeah, so no, it depends on if they're a large district or not, right? If they're above 3%, then that student is funded through that district. Whether they hire their own person or come to USDB and contract with us and say, we need some of these services, that district pays for it. If it's less than 3% district, then USDB pays for it. So the medium and small districts and charter schools throughout the state, that's what our entire budget is for. Well, and our own campuses. But as you know, our campuses are a minority of the students that we serve. We only have about 300, 350 kids on our own campuses. So the thousands of others that we serve are in all of the districts. And most of those are funded through the legislature to USDB if they fall below the 3% line.
That answer your question. Do you have a follow-up, Vice Chair Davis?
Just a quick follow-up. So the students are not generating the funding at USDB.
No, we don't receive WPU or growth funding like regular districts do. We take our personnel array and work with the legislature every year and say, this is how many kids we are serving, this is our current personnel array, and we've received this many more kids from out of state or that have for whatever reason, and or that have aged up from preschool or PIP right into our programs. And so we need 2 or 3 more teachers this year, and we need a new audiologist, and we need this and that in order to meet their IEP requirements. And that's where we get our annual kind of presentation to the legislature during the session and say, this is what we need. And when they were not going to fund us this year, that's when I started making calls at the end of the session saying, listen, we don't really have a choice on serving these kids. You kind of have to give us the money we need to hire the teachers to serve them. And so to their credit, they came through in the end.
Superintendent Coleman, can I add something?
Right on. Yeah, go right ahead.
I think it might help Board Member Davis. Some of these students, when they come on, that they're getting their services. When you talk about the services we're providing in those districts, these are students that are getting direct services from their teacher. However, because of the sensory loss, there can be some pretty high expenses that come along with that, which could be, for my side, it's an interpreter. And that's something that the district themselves has not prepared for. And so besides just the services of a teacher of the visually impaired or a teacher of the deaf, we often send other services which are that are just outside the budget for them, which is like an interpreter. And those are the positions that they often look to us for. I also noticed in a lot of these districts that are in the yellow, they're not really like 2 FTEs in each of them. They're usually leading like, I have 2 students that need this service. So it's hard for them to fund a position for a student that only needs a minimum amount of service throughout the week. So we can do that by hiring a person that serves all the districts, Salt Lake, Tooele, Washington, whatever it is, and then we can be able to spread that out. People also seek our entity as the experts. So when I'm a teacher of the deaf or a teacher of the blind and visually impaired, I don't look for something to see if there's a position in Salt Lake District or Tooele District, because my job goes with the student, right? So the stability of that job isn't as desirable. Plus, school for the deaf and the blind, it makes sense that you'd apply there. Then I can maintain my job, and then as the needs fluctuate, I can go between wherever I'm needed. So it's a way we can help them and help the students better. And it's just a nice model. I think that we can be there if they need us. They can always choose not to use us. That's always their option.
The Vice Chair Davis, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is a nice model. It seems like it should be funded for everyone. And then we're back to the intensive services discussion, because these very extra high cost students are being funded through a state line item for districts of a certain size, but then districts of another size have to come up with very, little reimbursement options. They have to come up with the funds on their own. So I guess it's a part of a discussion of a bigger picture, and maybe we need to revisit that rule and all of it at some point, but this has been helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Earl, you had your hand raised, and then we'll go to Member Hart.
Yeah, just a simple question. Superintendent Coleman, how many educators do you think are impacted by the 3% rule each year? And I'm just trying to get an idea if there is a dramatic impact, or if it's over the course of 5-10 years, you have 3 or 4 teachers that have to kind of do the pick and choose. And maybe it's not even that. I'm just trying to understand the impact of teachers yearly.
Well, if very few up to this point, but now that we see that some of these districts are growing and they're bumping up and going over or under that threshold, then we're starting to see a few. The last couple of years, okay, for example, this year Tooele went over the threshold, and I think they have like maybe 3 FTEs out there, 3 to 4 between the two schools, deaf and blind. Provo requested 2 or 3 last year that we didn't have to come up with. And so it's starting to be, maybe an average of 5 per year. But that's even really depends on the year. That might not keep happening.
Yeah, are they
So
leaving your program and are they hiring personnel from different areas?
We have had some schools that said or districts that said, we're not going to hire people, you have to do it because we're now below the 3% line. We've had others that have said, we're going to keep our people as long as they want to work for us. And we would just like additional services from you as we grow. And that seems to be the best model. The truth is, if some of these said, hey, we're below the line now and you've got to provide it for us, we would tell them, we will if we can get the FTEs, but if not, you're still on your own. Even though the 3% rule is there, we aren't going to pull positions away from existing, school districts if we have to do that. We haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah, you're saying it's a matter of the funding each year. So if something like that happened, you'd have to request the funding going in, so you're not actually pulling services from students that are currently receiving services. Is that right? Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then if we have extra capacity, we're happy to share that, even if they're just above the 3% line. And, we're happy to say, oh, we've got some extra caseload with this person. We'll help you for this year. No guarantee ongoing, but we've got the person hired. We might as well use them to help the kids, right? So.
Yeah, and so if I might just interject something here, just because I go way back in time, not very far back in time when teachers were talking about the 3% rule and that. The one part that has not been shared today is some of the teachers that are in these districts, they like working for the district. They're contracted with the district. They're in a whole different lane of compensation and everything else. However, if you work for the school for the deaf and blind, that contract is in a different place. And it may not be the same kind of benefit package and the same supervisors and same. So the teachers that talked to me in the past regarding this 3% rule, some of them prefer to stay in the lane of the district, but at USDB or USBE on our side, we don't negotiate. We're not in this negotiation place on salaries and benefits. We have what the legislature gives us, and we have to stay in that particular lane. But I have to put that out there because nobody else has said it. But that was kind of the past pushback of my compensation and how am I being paid, and the other piece is who is my supervisor, because I really get along with the superintendent, and I don't know if I can with the LEA's superintendent. I don't know if I can get along with Superintendent Coleman. So those are some of the dynamics of this 3% and some of the concerns that teachers have had in the past. So I don't.
Yeah, yeah. Those were the concerns that were brought up when the opt-out was provided, but nobody's asking them to leave their current employer, and so it's kind of a non-issue that's been brought up. I don't mean to be disrespectful of their concerns. That it's an issue, but it's not something they have to worry about. Nobody's asking them to leave their current employer at all. Just we're not even proposing any changes to the rules that we have. We're just sort of explaining it to the board at this point.
All right, board member Hart.
As a relatively new person to this situation, I'm really impressed by Superintendent Coleman, your ability to work with districts and the unique needs that they have, and sharing resources and keeping the student at the center of your decision making. However, I also feel like there's a need to codify some of this, and I don't think the 3% just seems like an arbitrary line in the sand. I also think that the option of well, just move that FTE over so that you're not asking the legislature each year for an appropriation. I think there needs to be a solution somewhere else. I very much think that the students belong in their communities and that WPU could stay there. But then this consulting model really does seem appealing, because I've personally witnessed students getting extremely top-notch services from your part of the organization. And I think that should be available to all districts, but at the level that's appropriate for them. So I can see how a smaller district would want you to assist with more, perhaps, and a larger district may have some things that they can do, economies of scale and such. And then there's the geographic concerns as well. I feel like the 3% is somewhat arbitrary. Would there be any interest? Am I understanding this correctly? And would there be any interest on, for lack of a better term, a menu of services and moving this more to a consultant role that then is somehow the funding? I understand it needing to come from somewhere, but shouldn't it come from the districts, which I think has to do with, it touches on intensive services, but they're getting money to serve these students. You're providing services. I just feel the need to remove the legislature from deciding the funding for services. Not that they're problematic, but just that doesn't seem to make sense. But yet it also doesn't make sense to just shift the WPU. Am I tracking properly and understanding kind of the crux of the matter?
Well, yeah, you're asking the right questions, and we actually do have it pretty well outlined in policy, the full
good.
menu of services. And frankly, we do give a lot of services free to even the largest districts. It's just when it comes to FTE and staffing, that's where the board has drawn the line and said 3%, you got to pay for it. Below that, USDB covers it. Michelle, you had a comment too?
I just wanted to add also just a clarification for Board Member Hart. We also do not, like, if they were to come to us and get full services from USB, the WPU does not follow them. So a student that would be in the district that's being served by the district gets the WPU. If they come to USDB, then we do not get a WPU, then nor does the WPU follow them. So as long as their services are being provided in the district gets WPU. We just come in to support their blind, visually impaired needs. But we never get a dime of the WPU ever.
And Chair, may I follow up?
Yes.
That would have been my concern. I mean, we could look at doing what we need to do to shift that WPU over so that money comes automatically, but that doesn't seem to be at all the solution for a better way of doing, or a sustainable way of doing the business of serving the students. So I understand that the WPU doesn't come. I was wondering if, at first I was wondering if that was a possible solution, but I don't see that it sounds like it is.
So this is Susan Patton, and if I could just interject here as well. I'm the superintendent over the School for the Blind, and there's a lot of things, like Superintendent Coleman said, there's a whole array of services that we offer to all districts, and then smaller districts, and then very rural districts. One of the things that's been interesting to me, this is my first year in this position, is that we've had school districts reach out and say, we can't find people. We cannot find people. What can you do? We don't have enough teachers of the visually impaired. Can you help us in recruiting? Can you help us in Braille instruction? Because that's something that can't be a consultative model. That has to be something that's a direct instruction. 2 or 3 times a week that we're providing that instruction for literacy. The other thing that's been interesting to me is that the districts, the 3% districts, some of them we've had one this year, but I know it's happened in the past as well, who have reached out in time of need for if they have a teacher that's visually impaired on any type of leave, may that be maternity leave or that might be some kind of a leave of absence. They don't have the resources, nor do they have the staff to do that. We don't necessarily have that either. And again, we're not getting that WPU, but we try our hardest to fill in the gaps for those school districts. So there's a lot of different little issues that come into play that we have a great relationship, I think, with the majority of the districts. I mean, in my experience, again, just this year, we've had a really good experience. And I think that there are districts that are right on that bubble that are worried about the services next year or when they drop below or rise above that 3% district, 3% rule, because they don't feel necessarily equipped to handle that. And those are teachers that we're providing at this point in time. And the flip side of that is that our teachers are not wanting to work for their district either. So there's 2 parts of that where they're wanting to remain at USDB, where Joel had explained very well the problem of the district teachers not wanting to come to USDB, and that's still, it's just a very unfortunate situation. And I don't think that it's something that is universal either. It's not something that I've experienced this year that has been a universal but they are there. That is there. That was a whole lot of rambling, but I don't know that if that answered any questions as far as some of the intricate issues that we deal with on a very daily basis that we're working very well with districts as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other hands raised here. Board Member Lear, welcome. It's good to see you. Looks like you got through the technology glitch there. And
thank you. Yes, it was a little technology hell for a moment. All my devices were not cooperating. Maybe it was Carmen. Anyway, my question to Superintendent Coleman is a little bit off the 3%, specifically off the 3% issue, but very related to a comment he made earlier. And maybe you'll be a little patient because I wasn't able to access the very first. And that is, Joel, you mentioned that if the legislature hadn't funded your request to the tune of $700,000, you would have just been desperate. And I don't want to be unsympathetic because my information is wrong. But isn't it true that you have a very significant not school end trust, but school trust pot that LEAs don't have otherwise? Do you not have other sources of funding if the line item didn't come from the legislature? What, even on a temporary basis until they were re-educated, or maybe even on a permanent basis? And am I wrong about that?
No, that's actually a really good subject to bring up. We do have the enrichment funds, the trust land funds. The problem is that they're restricted and they're not supposed to be used for operational costs. And also now have, oh yeah, go ahead.
One sec, just to say, you say they're not supposed to, or are they specifically, is it specifically prohibited? I can see why an ongoing cost isn't ideal, but is it strictly prohibited, or is that just tradition? And can you be more specific about that?
It is prohibited, but with the State Board of Education, all things are possible. So had we had an actual emergency, we probably would have brought that to you. And if you wanted to fund certain positions one time using some of our reserves in that fund, there might have been a way. I can't answer that definitively because I'm not prepared for the question, but you have a good point. There might have been some emergency remedies. It just wouldn't have been appropriate for ongoing sustainability. So.
And follow up, please, Chair. Can I ask the Superintendent to follow up here? Can you tell us how much is in that the special school trust fund that you have just for USDB?
We get about $900,000 a year from that, almost $1 million. Let's round it up to $1 million a year that we use out of our $42 million budget. And that is used for our enrichment programs, our summer camps, and our special things that are within the definition of what those funds are supposed to be used for by policy and board rule. And also state, I'm sure there's some regulations in the law too. There might be. It's all codified in our policy.
One last comment, Chair, please.
Okay.
I just would like to know sometime, I know you say you can use 900,000 a year. I'd like to know the total amount that's in that fund, and then maybe explore other possibilities for not just having it, and not meaning this to be pejorative, but not being stockpiled, but rather used if there's a necessity. I'd like to explore that in the future and maybe see the exact controlling language for that other separate school trust fund.
Oh, yeah. In fact, we can have Carl include that in next month's financial report. Just a more clear definition. We'll bring that right back to you. That'll be easy to share with you.
I'd like
And the
that.
amount is in every budget packet every year, every month. You guys see the amount, how we're spending it, how much is left. Carl reports that, and that should be above in your packet.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Davis, your hand's raised.
Sorry, my bad. Thanks.
Okay. All right. I didn't know if you had another question. And Board Member Lear, your hand's still raised also, but I think you wanted it down. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, Superintendent. I appreciate you bringing this 3% reporting on that, this information and discussion. It's good to refresh our memories of why and what it's all about and how that's working. So thank you. Did you have anything you want to include on it?
Yeah, maybe I could just wrap it up with one final comment, and that is, we go by the rule, but if we have additional capacity in any way, we try to look to these districts between 3% and 6%, and we try to offer help there, even though we're not required to. If we have the resources, we do what we can to help them. And I kind of wanted to make the board aware of that, because that hasn't been part of a discussion before, but just so you know, that's what we're trying to do and ease that transition. If it came down to it and we didn't have the FTEs, then we would say, sorry, we can't help you unless you contract with us and pay for it. But our intent is to we know that we're in a unique position, and these districts have special education departments and programs, but this is the whole reason USDB was created, because it's such a low incidence disability to have deafness or blindness that it's really not always fair to expect them to be the experts in this. And so we really take our role as a supporting organization very seriously, because the bottom line, we don't care who serves a kid. We just want these children to have, honestly, I'm not saying this to be self-aggrandizing, but USDB is literally one of the premier programs in the entire country. And it would be a shame if a student couldn't access some of our expertise just because they happen to live in a district that has more kids than another. Those are the kinds of thoughts that keep us up at night, and the things we talk about in our superintendency meetings quite often. So I just wanted you to know it's your rule currently allows us some flexibility there, and we always do our best to deploy any excess capacity we have to help these districts in this kind of middle zone here that might be struggling to provide what the kids need. So that's all I had today.
Superintendent, can I add just real quickly a few comments about this being a very arbitrary 3%. I remember, I was not in the administration at this time, but I do remember some of the discussions that occurred at that time. And I know that it was this body, it was the Board of Education who had the discussion, had lots of stakeholder meetings. They had to pick a line in the sand. They didn't know if that 3% was the right line in the sand, but they did. make an attempt because they felt there needed to be clarity, much the discussions that we're having today. So I think that looking at it is a wise thing to make sure it's not arbitrary. It was something that was consulted. It was something that was dialogued about. And maybe that number wasn't the right number, but it was the most intelligent answer that that group could come up with at the time.
Yeah. And I would say this, if the board did want to revisit the number, my recommendation would be to move it up to 6%. But we would just try to assume additional services. We wouldn't try to replace all the current employees and services that the districts are currently planning. And the only reason I say 6% is because that would take in some of these districts that really seem to be struggling the most with getting the appropriate services to their students. So if you do want to have further discussions, that would be, no one asked my opinion on this, but if there was a discussion, I think that would maybe be a one to have if you're interested in the future.
This also leads to changing this recipe, also puts another additional burden on the legislature.
Yeah.
Who will be at the table. If that gets moved up, then it's more in growing the USDB group.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So, well, I appreciate this topic. And you're right, Superintendent Coleman, our Schools for the Deaf and Blind is top notch. Services are happening. They're happening in the small LEAs and also the very large districts. And kudos to all those that are making that happen. So thank you. Let's move to our next topic, which is 3.3. We have Assistant Superintendent Michelle Tanner and Ryan Green. Are you available, or is that how we're going to do this?
Actually, I'm going to turn over my opportunity to speak to my director. Her name is Adam Billings. Oh. And Ryan Green is working with Susan Patton. They are going to talk to you about, this is a proposed use from the enrichment funds, because according to the code, those funds are intended to use for all students across the state to enrich the lives of children. So this is an enriching activity. They have an opportunity to go to Tacoma, Washington, to compete with other high school students in a 70-mile boat race within 48 hours. So their students are really like to do this. Adam, I hope Adam is on screen. He can tell you he has a great passion for this. And Ryan Green, they've been a great team working on this to put this together. So we'll turn the time over to them.
Before we get into
by the way, for those of you that don't know, Adam Billings is actually a ship's captain. He sails tall mast ships around the world. So
before we get into this is information, not action, correct? Because
right,
this is a FYI. Is that correct, Superintendent? All right. It was kind of like,
yes.
Well, get it before you, that somebody's got to make a decision on it, and I don't think that was
yes. Well, I believe, yeah, it's already, we have the funds, and the advisory council's aware of this, and so I was not aware that it was an action item. I thought it was more informational, but it's pretty exciting either way, and it's already underway. They've been building these ships for a couple months now. So go ahead, Adam and Ryan, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Huntsman and Superintendent Coleman and the board for your time today. We're very excited for this enrichment activity. Ryan and I are big proponents of experiential learning. It's what our students are really capable of doing, and it's something that they can learn from. Just if you can go to the next part of the slide here, as Michelle Tanner was saying, we're looking at going to a race called the 70-48. If you can go down one more slide. The 70-48 is it's a race in Tacoma, Washington, from Tacoma, Washington to Port Townsend, and it's 70 miles, and you have 48 hours to do that. And I guess the big elephant in the room is, why would you want to take a group of deaf and a group of blind students, put them on a boat together, and then try to paddle 70 miles in 48 hours? That means we have to paddle through the night. So I guess the goal here is we want to bring the students and staff together. We want to unify our group efforts, and we want to focus on things that are positive and happening during this time of COVID and kind of distancing. So we've put together a plan to do just that. We have to build some boats. If you can go down to slide 5. So we're looking at building, well, we're not looking at, we actually are now building the 2 portions of the boat that you see on this slide, in the left, the middle of the slide there at the top. It's a Selway Fisher 40-foot dragon boat design, and we're going to build 2 of them, or we've built 2 of them. We're just finishing them up, and we're going to lash them together with 2 boards that are covered in epoxy resin, and kind of create a catamaran out of them. And then we're going to teach the students how to paddle and then take it to this race. So I'll let Ryan kind of jump in here and tell us what our plans are for developing a crew. But just in the boat build itself, we've built boats here at USDB before in the past and had some good success with that. So I guess at the beginning of this, we kind of wanted to make it an after-school activity, but we also have a deadline that we have to meet. So we have right now from JMS, we have 2 or 3 kids that come over every day. That's what I plan to be doing here in about an hour, is meeting a couple of the kids to work during their lunch break, and then they go back to school, and then they come back for an hour after school. And then we've been doing weekend clinics where they come in for 4 or 5 hours, and we just go gung-ho and work on these boats. And we've had the deaf students and the blind students come, and it's been a lot of fun and a lot of good experience for the students to have. But I'll let Ryan go on and talk about how we're going to build the crew and some of our planning there and what we have to look forward to.
Perfect. Thank you, Adam. Good morning, board. Yeah, for our crew, we have students participating from all over the state. We have a student from Logan, all the way up in Logan, all the way down to St. George, and everyone in between that's participating. In total, we have 10 students that will be floating, and we have 4 chaperones that will be on the boat. We'll be looking at doing some shifts on paddling, so the students won't be paddling the entire time. We can't say the same about the chaperones. I think we're going to be paddling throughout the night and probably nonstop to ensure that we're good there. But we didn't want to jump into this and to throw some landlocked students into a boat race when they haven't not only been 70 miles, but haven't been maybe 70 meters on the water. And so we really wanted to scaffold this and provide lots of opportunity for students to learn a new skill, several sets of skills, team building, leadership, that type of thing. And so we are going to be going down to Lake Powell at the end of the month to spend a number of days on the shore and in the water to work out safety, to work out team building. We got to find our stroke, being able to kind of work together to get that boat moving at an acceptable rate to get us to our to our goal of that 70 miles. And so deep into that trip later this month, we'll actually paddle 35 miles. And I think that'll give the confidence to the crew that this is possible. This is actually, things like this are I think for Adam and I really resonate deeply with us. It's a big reason why we got an education in the first place. We love to seek out opportunities, experiential activities that are seemingly impossible, and giving proper training and scaffolding and instruction and support. We know that our students can do this. They may not think they can do it right now, but we know they can. And it's going to be an amazing process to watch unfold. And we've been documenting it through video and pictures. And we've had amazing support from our advisory council. and as well as our superintendency. We've had full support from them, and that's very heartwarming, and we're grateful for that. Adam.
Yeah, just to throw it out there, I think we got the perfect storm in this situation. Ryan showed up in my office probably 3 months ago and said, "Hey, I just heard about this high school that did this. They built a boat and they went and did this race. Can we do that?" And if you have that type of intense desire to get kids involved in something crazy, and then you have a boat builder and you ask if you can build a boat, and you put the two together, this is what you get, something crazy. So we do have on the slides that that are in the packet that you've received, it does go over some of the budgeting. We've increased that. We presented to the advisory council, and they recommended that we increase our finances to 20,000. We're finding that that's a more accurate estimation of how much this will cost. The boat is almost complete, and we're just at about $1,000 for the boat. And then we're looking at, for travel down, we have to move the boat wherever we go. We have to take the boat with us plus the students. So getting to Lake Powell will take a large portion of that, and then going up to Tacoma will also take a big part of our budget. But it does give us an opportunity to get the students involved in teamwork, in innovation, working together, becoming a crew together, and building self-confidence. We had this one boy from the deaf school that's been coming over. Just one day he said, "Oh, we saw the movie that they put out, and I remember you came and talked to us in our school when we first started this." He's like, "I want to do this." And he was there the next day, and he's been coming every time, and we've had other kids come, and it's been kind of fun to see their interest peak as they've seen these pieces of wood that we got from the hardware store turn into an actual boat. We have teachers, we had the boats out yesterday working on them, and some of the teachers and their students came over, we're just looking them over, and it's something that's unique that we can provide that it kind of spurs their interest, and it's something they haven't experienced before. So
Adam, do you want to just mention the high school from Colorado that came down that has done it before, and what you learned from them?
Yeah, I'd love to. Great point, Joel. Ryan heard about this high school in Colorado, and after our meeting, I was like, "Hey, Ryan, can I reach out to these guys and let's find some stuff?" We needed boat plans. We needed an idea of what this would take, and Platte Canyon High School did this. Somebody wanted to do the race again, and they didn't know how to build a boat, and they thought, well, let's just look and see. And they got these boat plans, and we were fortunate enough to have their help. So after we showed any interest at all, they jumped right back in with us and said, "Hey, we want to come and help your students. We'll bring our students down. We'll meet you in Salt Lake." And they did. They brought 17 of their students and a whole bunch of parents, and they used our tools, and we spent a Saturday, and we took our patterns that we had laid out. We lofted the plans onto plywood and had them cut and ready. And when Colorado came, they helped our students stitch and glue all the components together, and we had boats by the end of the day. And it was really fun experience, and what we've loved just kind of interacting with them. They've kind of mentored us through this, but it's been neat to see they did it their way, and we're doing it our way. We have to make those changes and accommodate for our deaf and blind students, and that's been rewarding. And so we are meeting them at the race, and we're also meeting them at Lake Powell to do some training together on paddling and water safety, and so our journey with our mentor will continue in that way.
So I got to say, that's like almost my favorite part about this. There's so many good things, but that we have kids teaching kids, and they're not even our kids in the state. They're from out of state, but that to me is just awesome.
Superintendent Coleman, we have a board member with a hand raised. So can I, well, Member Klein, did you have a question or comment?
I just had a comment. I just want to acknowledge what a fantastic thing this is. I wish that all the students in Utah could participate in something so positive that could help them move forward and have something to look forward to and create these great memories and these skills. I just think, wow, we need more of this. And I would love to have them come back. Some of the kids come back to one of our meetings in the future and tell us what their experience was like.
That would be a great opportunity for them. I'm sure we can plan to do that.
So if I might just share one of my concerns, it wasn't too many years ago or not too far back, you guys were building a boat. And Adam Billings, you're an accomplished, certified captain of sailing ship, with sails. But you guys were building boats and you were floating them on Utah ponds with out of your school, and now you're going on this proposed adventure paddling. What is next? I don't see a sail.
Well, we'll save that for next time. We do have a plan, though. No.
But we're excited. We're excited about your enthusiasm, and we know that there's a lot of deaf and blind community that are still engaged and they benefit from this, even though they're not the actual participants, but they know their friends and they know people, and those experiences get shared and that. And so thank you so much. Was there more, Superintendent, that you wanted to add on this particular topic? I'm sure we'll get updates.
I also would like to add that several of the students are actually students that are not on our campus. So several of the blind students are actually from our outreach program. So we have these enrichment funds. We reach out to the districts. We try our very best to bring them. And sometimes it's hard because they're in far distances. And we expend the effort to bring them to this campus. So I am so grateful we have the enrichment funds. It is so hard for our students to feel fully a participant in a game or an activity instead of a side note. And so in these uses of the fund, they are the main deal. They aren't just need an interpreter to participate. They're in the game. And so it's just so nice. And the more we can get them out of their homes and off their computers to come do this kind of stuff. We make the efforts to make sure that they can participate in these activities, no matter where they are in the state.
And then this is Susan Patton. I just wanted to add one thing too. One of the things that we talked about when Ryan came to me with the proposal, I thought, okay, so what are we? That has to go through with the expanded core curriculum and whatnot. And the amount of the 9 areas that we are implementing that just naturally are taught in an experience like this, like self-determination, social interaction, career education. There's so many things that are taught to our kids that go right along with the expanded core curriculum, not only for the School for the Blind, but the School for the Deaf as well. So we can really, really teach these things that are meaningful. And the thing that's so great about it, that Ryan and Adam are just great proponents of this and really talk about it a lot with our students, is that they can do hard things. This is not going to be easy to be in a boat for 48 hours straight paddling. I mean, I can't even imagine what this is going to, it's going to be hard for them, but they're very excited, and they're going to be able to say to somebody else, or somebody else can say to them, remember when you did that? You can do this too. You can get through this college course. You can get this. You can do this. And so there's so many things that's so great, that goes right along though with our expanded core curriculum as well.
Well, thank you. Our concluding probably comment on this particular topic, let's see, question, Board Member Hart.
Susan, you almost took the words out of my mouth. Hats off to Ryan, Adam, and everybody that made this possible for them to do this. This is the embodiment of SEL, and this is also, just as you said, hitting on so many different areas of the curriculum. I just am beyond impressed. I hope ULEAD hears about this can maybe highlight it as an example of a best practice. I hope that the rest of the board kind of takes note on the kinds of things that can happen when we untie our educators' hands and we think big picture. And we can talk all we want about SEL and meaningful curriculum and engagement. You guys aren't talking about it, you're doing it. And I'm trying to think of ways as a principal myself to get your people in front of my people so that they can start generating some of the same ideas, although I'm a little worried about a vote. That wouldn't necessarily, anyway, that might not be our project, but I just hats off to the entire organization for bringing this to our attention and persevering through this and embodying what just best practices all around in education. Congratulations.
Thank you. Next, our last item with USDB is a superintendent's report. And the only thing standing between the board members and having a 10-minute break is your report, Superintendent Coleman. So they.
Okay, I can take a hint. No pressure there. But Chairman, I think you should know that after boats, we're moving on to airplanes and rocket ships.
Okay. There we go.
No, okay. I'll make it pretty quick. First of all, legislative update. The legislature was great. We've already discussed most of that. The only thing we didn't have funded was our smallest ask for one time, which was the metal structure on our Ogden campus. And if you remember, that was driven by our need for better USIMAC facilities. USIMAC is your initiative to provide Braille for the entire state. So it's like an agency within an agency, and USDB oversees that. But I think we're going to be able to have the resources this year in carry forward to fund that. So we will probably be okay, even though they didn't fund it. So we're going to be good there. We begin our budget formulation process right now that culminates July 1st. And so as we mentioned earlier, we start sitting down this next week and going top to bottom through every single FTE, every need of every child that we can anticipate at this point. And I got to just tell you how grateful I am to Carl Empey that he came on board a few years ago, because he has our system like clockwork. We know exactly when we're planning every single thing. And so we will come back to you with our final budget or our final personnel array when we have that finished. We also, I wanted to let you know, teacher licensing is progressing. You remember we had 16 teachers that were having licensing problems a few months ago, and every few weeks another one gets ticked off the list. And Malia Height and her staff have been great. They have an appeals process for some unique situations, and so far so good. And so just one at a time. I realize it's already March, and so we're glad, but these are licensing solutions that we hope will go into the future too. And the last item we have is I wanted to inform you that our largest campus, our JMS school on our Salt Lake campus, is the principal and the vice principal both announced that they will be taking different positions. Fortunately, within USDB, we're going to be using their talents, which is great. But those will be, we'll be having an administrative change there before the fall, where we're going to be going through the process of recruiting and hiring new leadership there at the school. They announced that to their staff this last week, and it's actually great news for everybody all the way around. We're excited for them. Amy will be moving down to going back to teaching. She's currently the principal, and it's been her desire for a long time to go back to teaching. And I told her, I don't blame you. Sometimes administration is not as fun as teaching, and we all of those that were in the classroom, we understand how great the classroom can be. And then Nate Harrison, who's been the assistant, he's going to become our teaching specialist. And what's the exact name of that position, Michelle?
Director of Instructional Supports.
That, and he is fantastic. And we've needed that to be filled for quite a while. So we're very excited. And I just thought I'd let you know so you're aware of that administrative change that'll be happening there. That's all I have for my superintendent report today that hasn't been already covered somewhere else, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent Coleman. I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time, and I've got a few texts here wondering when we're going to have a quick break. So board members at this time, 10-minute break. Maybe 11-minute break. We'll start promptly at 11:30, and we'll be hearing from our superintendent on the superintendent's report. So quick time out here, quick little pause. Those that are listening will be back streaming and working at 11:30. Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Coleman and all the USDB folks.
Okay.
Good meeting. Thank you. 10-minute break starting now.